Hello, and welcome to another Rouge unit of the week. And today we're taking a look at the Panzer B2. So just after the end of the First World War, the French military was in desire of a large breakthrough tank, armed with a self-propelled gun mounted in the hull. 75mm ended up being the desired caliber, with a rather heavy armor scheme, in this case early 20s, 25mm of frontal armor. By 1924 there was 4 prototype tanks that met the requirements: the SRA, the SRB, the SCM-21 and the FAHM. The SRB would be the tank that would be picked for this design, and by 1930, with some modifications, it would end up being known as the Char B. Now, its actual service of the Char B run is a very interesting tank, because it really is that bridge stopgap design between older World War I tank designs and modern tank designs. It's also rather interesting because it could be considered one of the first heavy tanks that really saw serious production. One of the major problems with this tank, and of many French tanks of this period, was the one-man turret design. As you see, the man in the turret, who was gunning the 47mm, loading the 47mm, as well as commanding the other guys, and if he was a platoon leader, other tanks around, he had an awful lot on his plate. On smaller French tanks, which only had a single gun, that wasn't too bad. But in a tank like this, where you also have to worry about the 75mm gun, and where they're pointing, and where they're facing, and who they're targeting, as well as what everyone else around you is doing, it was a whole lot of work, and definitely led to poor coordination. These tanks also were actually equipped with radios, as they weren't super common in the French army at this time. However, the radios only worked via Morse code. During the Battle of France, like with a lot of French military equipment, didn't see all that much use due to poor communication and due to just how well the Germans outmaneuvered the French army. Now, this tank was a very scary tank in a tank-on-tank fight against the early Panzer II, 3s and 4s, but that really wasn't happening. They were getting outmaneuvered by German tank columns. However, there's a few instances of Char B1s performing rather well, most famously Captain Pierre Billiot's famous ride, where he managed to knock out over 14 Panzers by himself. And of course, after the fall of France, a lot of these tanks would end up in German custody. And in German custody, they really just saw use as reserve line units to help defend the French coast. In-game, the Panzer B2 is a 40-point medium tank available to the 352nd Infantry Division, and it has 3 weapons. Weapon loadout you have is a 47mm cannon with 25 AP and 25 HE shots with 70mm penetration and 1.25 kilometer range. It's a pretty mediocre light/medium anti-tank gun. It does have a higher caliber compared to 37mm, so you have a little bit of extra high explosive capacity. Speaking of explosives, you have a 75mm cannon with 74 shots. You really think it could have just fit one more shell in there, but it has a 1.5 kilometer range and pretty decent HE for a 75mm cannon. And then you have a single machine gun with a whopping 6,000 rounds of ammunition, so good luck running out of ammo with that gun. Down to the miscellaneous stats, has 80mm of frontal armor, strong top armor, 55mm on the side, and 50mm at back. It goes 18 kilometers off-road, a whopping 25 kilometers on the road, has medium stealth and very low optics. So in battle, the Panzer B2 is frankly a pretty terrible unit, and there's a very good reason why you don't see it. It's available to only a single division, and in that division, with its tank slots, you have a very limited selection of tanks, and with high activation points, you're really only going to pick one tank, and the obvious one being the Panzer 39H. So the Panzer B2 just doesn't really have that much of a role. It's really slow. The gun, the anti-tank, is pretty mediocre. It's decent for fire support, but you got other things that can do fire support. So in Steel Division 2, it's a rather terrible unit. But I'm rather sad that I never actually got to cover this unit during my Unit of the Week coverage with ST44. So let's see how it actually plays out in ST44. So in SD44, the Panzer B2 is still mostly the same. It is much more expensive, but that's just due to the tank price and scheme of SD44. But one of the major buffs is the fact that it goes a whopping 53 kilometers on the road, which is definitely historically inaccurate, but it's more just so it can actually get to the front line, as the problem with the SD2 model is that due to its realistic speed and the large size of the maps, you just never get anywhere. However, in its native French countryside, it does perform much better. Also, with the maps being smaller in SD44, you can actually move around, albeit still slowly, with the Panzer B2. You definitely want to keep it on a road network so you can redeploy and do aggressive maneuvers with the unit. And also just due to the fact that with the hedgerow hell of SD44, you can actually use this thing efficiently at close ranges. That's really rare. It wants to be if only its 1 kilometer guns. Its anti-tank weapon is pretty pants, to be entirely honest. Most of the time you're really going to be fighting Shermans, and they will definitely outgun you. It can fight off Stuarts rather well, but it was a bit more of a rarity, and also it can kill light vehicles. The main thing, however, is that it's a very good infantry support vehicle, because it has the 75mm cannon, and the 47mm cannon is not great, but it's not bad for having an extra high explosive gun. It does a very good job, all in all, blowing up infantry units with smithereens, as you can suppress him rather quickly with the double rammy of the 47 and the 75, and heck, even light vehicles. If you don't get the initial penetration shot with the AP ammunition, the 75mm cannon will definitely do enough suppression to at least force the bugger to run away or shoot at you rather inaccurately. It also has a much more interesting availability in SD44. It's only available to 2 divisions, first being 716, with a rather low but still acceptable availability. And just considering that 716th doesn't really have a whole lot of proper tanks, it's all just French hand-me-downs, this is one of the best vehicles you can get for that division, so it definitely sees quite a bit of use. You know, I would only really recommend it so much in A phase. As in B phase, with more of the anti-armor coming on the field, it tends to be a bit pants. You can also get it for the Festung Gross Paris division, but you only get a single one in A phase, which is not terrible, but it's not exactly great, and you have other tank and light armor options in that division. So overall, this unit in Steel Division 2 is bloody awful. There's really no reason you'd ever want to take it. SD44, it's a much better choice. It's still not a great unit per se, it's still a bit of a meme, all things considering, but it's funny to see it's a big hunk of French metal still running around, well, French countryside in 1944, just with some different occupants inside. And well, I'm going to leave it off at that. This has been another Rang Rouge unit of the week. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as usual, please just take it easy.